The Super League is back, football is going to die, and the sport as we know it will never ever be the same. Or will it? Is this truly going to ruin the sport that we love, or is this just a new era of football that's going to just take some years of getting used to? The new rules and format for this new Super League also dropped on Thursday, and in this video we're going to go over it. I'm not going to quite explain the new format because there's been story after story explaining it way better than I could, but in this video I'm going to go over why I think it works, why it doesn't, in the most unbiased way possible, and I'm also going to explain why I have a sinking feeling in my stomach that this European Super League is going to go full steam ahead, and there's nothing that we can do to stop it. For anyone unfamiliar, the whole backstory to this big thing is back in April of 2021, 12 of Europe's biggest football clubs, including the Big Six in the Premier League, basically left the Champions League for a few days to formally announce the new European Super League. It was essentially a Champions League ripoff that was kind of closed, where the founding clubs couldn't be relegated from it or not compete in Europe. It was a massive cash grab, a big failure, and after just a few days, because of massive fan pressure and because of another aspect which I'll talk about in a minute, 9 out of the 12 clubs left the whole thing, ditched the idea within just a couple of days, and it kind of went under the radar for almost 3 years. But in the background, the idea of the European Super League never died, especially to Real Madrid, Barcelona, and Juventus. For the last 2.5 years, they have been fighting behind the scenes to bring the Super League back, and today they won big. Another big reason why clubs pulled out in the first place is because of the threats that UEFA and FIFA were sending them. They were basically saying they were going to sue these clubs, and that any player that supported this European Super League wouldn't be allowed to play for their country under any UEFA or FIFA competition. But what happened yesterday, Thursday, December the 21st, was that the EU's top courts basically declared that those threats by FIFA and UEFA were kind of monopolistic and unlawful, and that they weren't allowed to do that. Essentially saying that the formation of a European Super League would be allowed legally. And that is the big revival that Real Madrid, Barcelona, and Juventus have been praying for, I guess, for the past almost 3 years. Of course, there's problems with the formats, there's problems with the ethics behind it, there's problems with the owners, I'm sure, many moral questions and what this will do to football in general, but the biggest reason why everybody hates this European Super League idea, flat out, is simply because we all love how it is right now. Everybody absolutely loves that whether you're the top dog or you're crap, you can finish in the top 4 or 7 of your league and you can make it into European competition, and that every season the stakes for every club is the same. Treble winners Man City can finish 8th this season, and in 2025 they won't be in Europe whatsoever. That is what you call jeopardy. Competition, basic sporting merit, and what the Super League does is eliminate that to a certain extent. Now don't get me wrong, this new format that was just proposed the other day is miles better than the one that we were going to get in 2021. If you don't remember, back then the 12 founding clubs were going to just stay in the competition forever. Since they were the 12 founding clubs, they are always going to get that revenue, and no matter how crap they were in the league or outside of the Super League, they were going to keep their spot in the competition. That is just a violation of basic sport, and that was never ever going to be worked or accepted. What the Super League would be today is a 3-tier system where a team at the top, no matter how bad they're doing in the league, would stay in that league still, but could be relegated from that league down to the Super League below. It's very confusing. Let's say Man City finished 8th this year. In Champions League rules, they then wouldn't have a spot in the competition the next year. They would then go a year without any revenue from European competition. But if they were in the Super League and they were bad in the league, they would keep their spot in the Super League, in the Star League, it would be called. The only possible way they relegate themselves from European competition is if they finish bottom of their group in the Star League, and then bottom of their group in the Gold League, and then in the bottom 20 in the Blue League. So they would have to have 3 or 4 or more than that terrible seasons where they then not qualify for Europe. Imagine the Super League was going on today, and tomorrow Man City were fined of all their charges, they were relegated down to League 2. It wouldn't matter. They wouldn't be kicked out of the Super League because they would then have to get relegated, get relegated, get relegated again, and then they would be out. That's why these new Super League plans, you're seeing them being labeled as sporting merit, as healthy competition, when it's really not. Because is Real Madrid gonna have 3 back-to-back-to-back relegations? Never. Same with Man City, same with all the big clubs. It still guarantees them a spot in Europe season upon season unless it horribly goes wrong. So at the core, or if you do like even a minute of research or critical thinking, you would know that this isn't anywhere near the sporting merit we have at the moment with the UEFA competitions. And then you have to ask why. Why is it formatted like that? The number one piece of feedback that these clubs got, and the number one reason why the Super League didn't work, was because of this sporting merit, or lack thereof. And still, after years and years of pondering that idea, this is all they can come up with. No system where you only qualify in your league? No. That's not right. And then you have to ask why. Why aren't they able to make that compromise? Why are they not just able to be a Champions League with the same rules away from UEFA? Why do they have to format it differently like that? It's because of the greed, guys. It's because they don't care about the sporting merit. They only care about keeping their spot in Europe indefinitely and keeping the revenues from that indefinitely. That is a big reason why this thing doesn't work in my eyes, because you're missing the amount of jeopardy necessary for true fans to really care. And what worries me the most is that format might be the perfect balance between sporting merit and greed that these clubs need to take over the Champions League. Because no matter what you say about that format, no matter how greedy you call it, since it's better than the last one, it's a way more attractive option to the clubs who are currently rejecting the Super League. Maybe over the next few years, you're going to see these big but small European clubs like your Ajaxes, like your Portos, be joining the Super League, and because of that, be given a massive war chest of funds because they joined these founding clubs. And then you're going to have the Romas, and maybe the Milans join. And then as the years go on, bigger and bigger clubs begin to open their minds to it, while fans begin to acclimatize to the idea of this Super League. Keep in mind, for the first few years that this is going to be out, it's probably going to be completely free to watch for fans. But eventually, as people begin to accept it, I'm worried that the financial format is just going to be way too attractive of an option for the Manchester Uniteds of the world to reject that. I'm just saying, man, my club is owned by the Glazer family. If there's anybody in the world that is going to be going back on their words and joining the Super League, it's those guys. I'm telling you, all it takes is one of the Prem's big 6 clubs to go back on their word and join the Super League for all of them to join. I guarantee you, these venture capitalists really want to join the Super League. The only thing stopping them is the fan protests. They know they get absolutely slaughtered by fans right now if they committed to the Super League. But give it like a couple of years and fans start accepting it and they're gone. They're going. No questions asked. It's such an attractive financial offer for these venture capitalists to be a part of, for them to turn down. There's absolutely no way they turn it down. At the moment, I'm very skeptical that the European Super League can work without the English clubs, but I'm also very convinced that the Champions League can't work without the other big teams in Europe. Because what happens when the PSGs and the Marseilles join? What about the Milan clubs? What about even some German clubs, perhaps? What if we're in a world where the Champions League is headlined simply by Premier League clubs, and that's it? It's just a glorified FA Cup with the addition of like Bayern and Dortmund? Like, what do you have there? What if we have half of Europe's giants in one league and the other half in the other? That's not Right. That's essentially my position. I think that the next few years we'll see smaller but big clubs committing to this. I think they'll start out with maybe a weak roster of teams, but since it will be free to watch and it will be a very enticing financial opportunity for clubs, I think eventually you'll see more and more teams leaving the Champions League to commit to the Super League. And then I think over some years, one Prem team, one Big Six side is going to say, okay, the fans seem okay with the Super League. We're going to leave UEFA behind, join it as well. And that's just going to start a whole opening of a floodgate where no one's going to be in the Champions League anymore. And it's just going to be a relic of the past. And no one's going to know what the European Cup used to be. And it's a little bit sad. Some of you know that almost 2 years ago now, I uploaded a video kind of detailing why the European Super League failed. And one of the big points I made in that video was that since the same owners are still there, we're still going to have the same problems, and that the Super League was going to return one day and probably end up becoming a reality. And, well, don't want to say I told you so, but here we are. So yes, all of the Big Six clubs came out and condemned the European Super League. I recognize that. But in 2-3 years' time, are they going to have the same position? If fans even started to accept the Super League even a little bit, you think they're going to hesitate to leave? I don't care what they're putting out in statements today, because it doesn't matter what they say today. It matters what they'll be thinking 2-3 years down the line, and I guarantee you, we won't be remembering these statements they put out today 2-3 years down the line. I think they're going to leave the Champions League, man. And since I made that video I talked about, I've been imagining a world where the Super League is a reality, and I've been trying to accept it in a way, and I just can't do that. The Champions League is rooted in over 70 years of rich history, involving the best players, the best teams, the biggest moments, the best comebacks, the most heartwarming, gut-wrenching, nerve-wracking times that football has ever seen. And you're all just going to throw that away because you want a little bit more money and you think UEFA has too much? Are you kidding me? The ruling went against FIFA and UEFA because their regulations were monopolistic and deterred competition, at least in the business sense. But the ideals behind this European Super League, no matter how they format it, is monopolistic. It still deters competition, but just not in a business sense, but more in a sporting sense. Florentino Perez will preach that football is now free from the monopoly of UEFA, but he just wants it to be the monopoly of Real Madrid. That's my problem.